Well, hello friends, we are outside. I'm in the garden and you know, it is fall, but it doesn't look or feel like fall in Iowa here right now. We're having right now some warm weather. We're gonna cool down here really soon. By the time you're probably watching this, we're gonna be cooled down finally, hopefully. But currently we're having record-breaking warmth in October. Not a fun way to start October, but it does give you ample time to be able to work outside. All around me, I am seeing combines in the field harvesting in front of me, behind me, but the field's right around my house so far. We're not harvesting yet. So we're gonna be able to be in the garden a little bit here. And I thought this was a really fun day because this is, again, we've done a video on garlic planting, but this is now another thing you can do in the fall in preparation for the following year. So thinking ahead in the garden, what you wanna be harvesting next year. So today is all about shallots. And then we're gonna go over and harvest some sweet potatoes over at my mom's that we planted. But I wanna kind of amend and get ready my bed for my shallots. I need to do a little bit of work in it because you're gonna see why it has settled quite a bit. Shallots are one of those things I just started getting into a couple years ago, and I really enjoy growing them because, like garlic, they're super easy. You can plant them early, as in the fall, the year before you want to harvest them, and then you can harvest them the next year and have beautiful shallots. And let me just tell you, you know I love to cook, you know I love to make videos on the food I make in the kitchen. Shallots, if you like to cook, are they're life-changing. I mean, they're not life-changing, but they're really amazing. They're a lighter, sweeter onion flavor. They work really well in dressings like vinaigrettes. They work really well though in recipes too. If I'm gonna use fresh onion, oftentimes I go for a shallot because I like the flavor of it better. So we're gonna plant some shallots. I'm gonna show you the one thing I don't usually do. We are planting grocery store shallots, kind of. I'm gonna show you why. So we're in my vegetable garden. You can see where my tomatoes were, where my usual vegetables go that are yearly planted and transferred from bed to bed. I go in a clockwise motion where I do rotate beds. But what I have behind me here are my big bed of, you see it, it's rhubarb. You know I love rhubarb. My garlic that I planted, and you can see a few of them are actually starting to come up. But then behind it here I have my asparagus. And this bed, which the small area is for some shallots. Now, this is also where I do put some herbs, which you can see here. But my shallots, as you're gonna notice, the bed has settled quite a bit. This is the one bed that I don't actually appreciate the way I did it, which is my own fault. I built the bed around a current existing in-ground garden that had my asparagus. So it is kind of a proponent of some weedy grass that comes up in it. It's just not fun. But what I do need to do is add some new soil to this because it has settled. Now, you know, when I'm doing soil, I love to use Espoma products. So I'm today gonna use some of their raised bed mix. Sometimes I just use my own mix, but in the essence of time and sometimes just ease and energy, I like to use a pre-made mix. And this is a really good one because it's organic, has really good earthworm castings, has a wonderful mix of nutrients that can kind of help get the bed started. And then I will amend it further, but we're gonna start by putting in the soil so we can really start lifting up because you can see it really has settled. Ground does settle every year. That's not uncommon. And oftentimes I'll just top dress some of my existing raised beds with my compost I make here at home. The problem is that compost is sometimes not what I want to use when I have such a big settlement. This definitely needs some soil to it too. Compost is not soil, it's compost. And while it's a beautiful organic matter to add to your beds, it's really good to have a good amount of soil in them, which is why I'm using my favorite raised bed mix. So when I make my own mix, I like to usually do around 60% topsoil, 30% of a good compost, and then 10% of a soil lightener. This has kind of a mix that's similar to that, which is why I feel really comfortable using it. And it has just a nice lightness, which is really important. When you're working with anything, you want to make sure, especially for a raised bed, that it's easy to work with and that it's just nice and carefree. When I have it on there, I first like to just break it up. Usually I have garden gloves on. Do you think I can find my garden gloves today? No. And I refuse to just open a new package of garden gloves. If you're a gardener, you know that feeling because you feel like you're always either losing your garden gloves or getting a hole in them somehow. Why? I don't know, and how? I have no idea. So what I'm doing is just spreading out this raised bed mix as best as I can, breaking up some of the bigger pieces. If you see a little bit of white in the bag or a little bit of mildew, that's no problem. This bag has been sitting in my shed for a while, so it's not surprising that in the heat it would have a little bit of that, but it will air out really quickly. So now I'm just spreading it back out beautifully, and it works. Like, this is what I love about a good raised bed mix. You can just tell instantly how nice it is going to be to plant in this. So you can see instantly, this is perfect to plant in, which I love. So while this has great nutrients, and it does, it has really good nutrients in it, I always like to amend it a little bit on top of that. So just like I did for my garlic, I'm gonna add some just composted chicken manure. It does not smell like chicken manure. It has an earthiness to it, but I like to add that right in just because it has a great nutrients. And then since we're planting shallots, just like if I was planting other bulbs, I actually sometimes use a bulb tone, which sounds counterintuitive. But when I'm using Espoma products, what I love is you really can't too easily misuse them because they're all really good organic products that aren't going to hurt. But what I like about the bulb tone, it's formulated usually for flowers, for their bloom cycle, but also for the nutrients for the bulb, which is what they're going to be used for here with the shallots. So I'm going to put a little bit of that on top too. I'm just going to mix it in. Now, when you're going to mix in your amendments, obviously this is the first year I have extra, I just put down the soil, but you don't need to till them in deeply. Working them into the top few inches, 2 to 4 inches, is enough. That rain over time is going to take them where they need to go. Your roots also of your bulbs aren't going to be too deep. They're going to be 4 to 6 inches deep. So that is going to work down where they're needed. So you can just work it in. It's the same with existing beds. When I amend them, don't use a tiller to till them in. Rake them in gently with whatever top dressing you're doing if you're going to do a compost, or if you just want it on top, just work them into the top couple inches is all they need. So we're just making sure to smooth this out, and then we can start planting. So when it comes to shallots, it's pretty easy to plant them, very similar to garlic. So usually I say don't just go buy grocery store garlic, or shallots in this case, to plant. But there's a reason I'm doing this. I could not find a good source this year for shallots to order the larger ones I wanted. And I don't know for sure what variety these are. They kind of look like a creme brulee to me. They're a red large shallot. What I often have and what I grow year to year, I'm gonna show you, are these smaller red shallots, kind of like a Dutch red shallot. And this is how shallots grow. You break them apart every year, you plant one individual shallot, and then it grows a cluster of shallots. These now I've been leaving out because they're ones I'm going to plant, and you can see they're already sprouting. So I'm going to replant the ones I do have from some previous years. And you can see they're already sprouting really well, and they're going to grow numerous shallots. See all the different greens? But I'm also I went to my local co-op. I have a good grocery co-op, and these were grown locally. That is why I'm comfortable planting these from a grocery store. If I couldn't find locally grown ones, I wouldn't know if they were good for my area, if they're gonna work well. But if I'm able to find ones that I know are growing locally and growing well, I know the variety is gonna work in my area. When we go to plant it, it's really pretty simple. So I have, only 4 foot wide raised beds here. So you can make a row if you want to. But what you need to do is just so if there are 2 shallots on one, like in here, I'm feeling that there is a side shallot in this one, that there's 2. So if there is, I'll have to break this one apart. You only want to plant one at a time. So if there's 2 of them together, this one too, you can see better here. This one has 2. You want to make sure you split these apart. See this? Because each of these is going to grow a cluster of shallots. So you plant them individually. Now you're going to have to plant, when they're large like this, you have to plant them much deeper because they need to make sure that they can grow a whole cluster. So what I'll do here is I'll dig down probably about 6 inches for these, and make sure I can stick them down in the soil, which you can see it's nice and deep. And then I'll cover that up and go down the row. Now these will grow hopefully a nice cluster of shallots. So I'm gonna leave, close to a foot in between these larger ones, just to make sure that they have plenty of room to grow. When it comes to the smaller shallots, and I'll show those here, these are much smaller. So I only plant these about 4 inches deep. And you can see they already are getting roots on them. They already have greens on them. But it's the same process where I split them apart. I will put them down about 4 inches and then put them in rows. And these can go a little closer together, probably like 6 to 8 inches apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and plant a whole bunch. You can see now I have put the soil back on top. I'll water them well. We're extremely dry here in Iowa where I live, so these will be watered. probably a few times yet this fall. You know, hopefully the greens will come up. A few of them already were shooting up. I'll give an honorable mention here that sometimes I do plant here also. I have these perennial or walking onions over here. They're called walking because you keep them in the ground. They're perennial. They're spring onions. And so when they grow up though in the summer, they get these little seed heads. It falls over. And then from each one of these, tons of onions sprout. What I often do is take these seed heads, and all these will be an individual onion. So you can actually just plant these and get these beautiful scallion-like green onions in the spring. So I'll just break all these apart and see how they're already sprouting little sprouts. So then I'll take these and I will just go and push a whole bunch of these in here, just usually in late fall. And that way, in the spring, I'll have all these nice little green onions to come out and grab, and I use them just like a scallion. So if I want to just have something fresh on top of a salad, or they're really good sauteed or blistered under like a broiler, I will come out here and do that and just plant a whole bunch of them in, so I have a few row of these. And then I leave just a little pile of them always growing perennial, so I can just have these little seed heads that I can go plant. But anyway, that's just for honorable mention. You can see it's actually super easy to plant things like shallots, to plant things like garlic, and it's really nice because usually in the fall we're slowing down, we maybe don't have as much to do in the yard, so it's nice to quickly do it, know you're gonna have something next year that you don't have to even think about, it's already planted. So now we're gonna go over to Mom's, and we're going to harvest with Kip. You hear Kip back there. We're gonna harvest some sweet potatoes because usually I wait till frost, but you're gonna see why we're gonna harvest them now. So we are now over in Mom's garden area. Now, if you remember, I haven't done a video over from here for a while, but I put this raised bed garden area for Mom, it's probably been 4 years ago now. And it's edged in limestone. It has pea gravel between all the beds. So there's no string trimming, there's no mowing in between them. It's quite wonderful. I love this setup. Someday this is what I would like to have. But it works really well for Mom too. What you see behind me is a massive mountain of sweet potato vines. So sweet potatoes you grow as slips or as little starts. Pretty much when the potato starts growing those little green sprouts, you take them off, you put them in water, and then you plant those once they root. And over the season, look at all the vines. So you may know and be familiar with sweet potato vine annuals that we plant in containers, and they're beautiful. The ones that actually grow off the vegetable sweet potato are just as prolific. Yeah, they are unbelievable, and you can see how big they get. Now, usually, we would let these go until our first frost will sweet potato vines are super susceptible, and once they get a little bit of frost on them, they just wilt, and then we'd come out, cut them off, and then dig them up, just because it usually, for a lot of vegetables, makes them slightly sweeter to be able to go through a frost period. These are starting to heave out of the ground, and I'm gonna show you that. So we're gonna dig them up now. You can see that this is just one raised bed. It's a 10 by 4 foot raised bed. There's strawberry beds, tomato beds, beans. You can see Mom's water hose is actually laying back there. I could have cleaned that up, but I didn't. So what we have here are just massive amounts of vine. But what I want to do is take you in and show you, which they're even blooming in places. See those blooms? If we go down in here, we're gonna look for the actual sweet potatoes, like where they originate from, and see how those are heaving out of the ground. Now, thankfully, they're still being shaded by the greens. But when they start doing that, which these are 2 over here, it's really time for them to come out. And that can just be from it being dry. It can be from a few things. But what I'm gonna do is go in with my pruners, my secateurs here, and I'm just gonna start taking off all of this growth from the sweet potatoes themselves and pulling back all of this green vine, which you can see is going to pretty quickly expose where the actual mounds are. So you can see here, massive mound of wonderful compost material. That's what all these greens are gonna do. They're gonna go on our compost pile, which will again feed all these garden beds in successive years. What we have here is an exposed, you can see here, it is roughly six hills or areas of these sweet potatoes. Now, if you start going in, you can see what I'm doing is I'm just taking a garden fork. Now, I call this a small garden fork because, and I'm saying this because in the past people have laughed when I call this small. This is a potato fork. You can get large hay forks more. This is a potato fork, so it's smaller. The idea is it should loosen the dirt around them, but hopefully not puncture as many potatoes. But what you do is you gently lift the potatoes out. You can see like a mound there. And then what I'll do is I'll just pull them apart. You can see I got a few. These are actually starting to split because they were just a little overripe. That's okay, they're gonna cure just fine. I mean, look how beautiful and big some of these are. You know, you can grow sweet potatoes. Isn't that wonderful? I think things like this are just exciting. So what we do is we take our fork, we put it in around where those are, and we go down and gently start lifting without trying to break any, which sometimes you do, and that's okay. Now lately we have not been growing traditional baking potatoes, russets, just because we don't eat as many, and it's more fun to grow sweet potatoes. The one thing in the past we've had major problems which I'm going to try to show you, is right here. So this would show that a mouse did start chewing on some, which is what we used to have major problems with before when we had a massive in-ground garden on another area. These now thankfully really don't have too many spots, so we thought moving the bed here probably would help, and it looks like it really has. Because field mice and things love to come in and chew on like a sweet root vegetable like this. So I'm gonna go through and start getting them all out. Then we'll talk about what we do with them, storage, care, how to save them for long-term use. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So what's kind of funny is, I think what's always important to stress, growing vegetables at home does not mean you're gonna get the perfect looking vegetable like you do in the grocery store. Grocery store vegetables are picked for perfection because that's what we are trained to buy, is perfect looking vegetables. So while this sweet potato right here would be a grocery store one, this one most likely would not. You know, this one would not because it has a bad spot. Well, I'm gonna still use this. I'm gonna let this dry off, let this cure, but then I will cut off those bad spots. I'll scrub these well and I will use them. I think that's important to note. Now some of them, like this one, it's just massive and it got a little overripe. See how it started splitting everywhere? That could be from dry weather also. Things like that I may not use. Now, can we just talk for a minute here? This is a sweet potato. I'm gonna guess this at over 5 pounds, because I know what a sack of flour weighs when it's 5 pounds. This feels slightly heavier than that. This is a massive sweet potato. We will chop this one up to use it, obviously. That's the fun of growing things at home. You never know what Frankenstein. I think the Espoma garden tone I used worked. I think it worked and grew some pretty good sweet potatoes, which you can see here. So you might be wondering, what do we do with sweet potatoes now? Usually what I do is I rinse these off. So you're gonna be able to see that I put these in a black plastic container that has holes so air moves through it well. But it also is nice so I can go up, rinse it off really well, and then let it dry. At this point, I want them to be in some type of dry, shaded storage. So in a barn, in a shed, in a garage, where there's good air circulation, for a few weeks. That allows those sugars within the sweet potato to finish curing and really brings on more of their sweetness. When you pull one right out of the ground, they don't always have the most flavor on them because they need to cure for a couple weeks. It's usually the same with winter squash too. Those sugars need to condense and really need to come into their flavor. So that's what's gonna happen now is these will get washed, they will dry, and then they will let just sit for a couple weeks so they really can take on more of that sweet potato flavor that we know and love. At that point, what I always do is I start using up the ones that maybe have spots on them or bad spots. Like this one was splitting too. I think it will be fine when I cut it. If it's woody, maybe then I wouldn't use it, like if it's tenuous. But as long as it's tender, I will cut off and scrub those bad parts and I will still use it. If I grow a vegetable, I'm gonna use it. Even if something kind of ate on it a little bit, that doesn't make it bad. It makes it just a spot you need to clean a little bit more. So it's a good harvest year. Sweet potatoes, the best thing for them, or any root vegetable, is to make sure they have really good, loose soil to grow in. And that's how you're gonna get nice root vegetables like potatoes. This bed we did amend this year with some, raised bed mix. You can tell it probably needs a little bit more because there's some kind of hard dirt down in it. We also didn't get perfect rains, and we pretty much let these go with just a little bit of supplemental water. So really, with all that, we still got beautiful sweet potatoes. that we're gonna be able to use for quite a while. Now these should last once cured. They will sit in a basement just like any other potato I would have, or in a kitchen. You know, if you keep them in light, direct sunlight, they could turn green, but also they could start sprouting, which you don't want that to happen. So that's why you try to put them somewhere to keep them dormant so you can just eat them. So at that point, these will be on hopefully my Thanksgiving table. You know what I'm gonna make with these? My sweet potato salad. I love that. I posted that a couple months ago, and it is my go-to fall salad. And I think I might serve it warm as a side dish at Thanksgiving. We always go to my sister's for Thanksgiving, so hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed kind of seeing how you can do things in the garden in the fall. It's not just like a time to do nothing, but it's a time to get ready for the next year, whether it's planting garlic or planting shallots, but also digging up some more of this year's bounty, which is sweet potatoes, which are dug up much later than a traditional potato. So I hope you enjoyed it. I have more work to do in the garden in this oddly warm fall we're having. Hopefully we'll get some rain soon, and you'll see even a bigger smile on my face with that. Happy planting, friends.